Welcome to 2 Years Time, the podcast for tomorrow's leaders. This podcast is carefully crafted by and for community college students who are eager to shape their future. On 2 Years Time, we embark on a transformative journey together where we explore the struggles and triumphs that await us during our time in higher education and beyond. Together, we'll explore topics such as personal growth, career development, housing issues, transferring, navigating financial challenges, and much more. So, get ready to embark on this incredible journey with us. Join us every episode as we unlock the secrets to success, share stories that resonate with your community college experience, and provide you with the inspiration and guidance you need to thrive.
I'm your host, Renny Araki. Today we're joined by Los Angeles Community College District Trustee Sarah Hernandez. Trustee Hernandez wears many hats embodying the spirit of a community college professor, environmental and land use attorney, former middle school teacher, nonprofit founder, and a community organizer. Her dedication to empowering communities and increasing civic engagement has been unwavering throughout her professional and personal life. Education has always been at the core of Trustee Hernandez's journey. She holds a Bachelor of Arts from Duke University, a Master in Education from Loyola Marymount University, and a Juris Doctor from Loyola Law School. Recognized for her outstanding contributions, Sarah was appointed by State Assembly Speaker Anthony Rendon to serve on the State of California Library Resources Board. Outside her professional endeavors, Trustee Hernandez remains actively engaged in her community, both politically and at the grassroots level. From serving as an Assembly District Delegate and a delegate for the Democratic National Committee to co-founding DTLA Strong, a resident group focused on community organizing, Trustee Hernandez consistently works toward building political power and amplifying the voices of her fellow community members. It is an honor to have Trustee Hernandez join us today to discuss the housing crisis and its impact on our community college students. She brings a wealth of knowledge, experience, and a relentless commitment to creating real, tangible solutions for the challenges facing our students. So without further ado, let's dive into a conversation with this inspiring advocate for community empowerment. Welcome, Trustee Hernandez. And thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. And how are you doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Happy Friday. It's always my favorite day of the week. Mm-hmm. So I know you have an extensive background in education and you also teach law, which one of my favorite classes has been labor and employment law, which I had a chance to take at UCLA. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got into student advocacy and really putting yourself out there to get students, to get the students to the resources that they need to help them be successful?
Yeah, well, thank you. I was born and raised in Salinas, California, which is a small farm worker town on the Central Coast. And I was born there. My dad's family's from around here in Southern California. My mom's from back east, but I was born there because my parents were really involved in the farm worker movement of the 70s. And so, lots of bedtime stories about Dolores Huerta, Bobby Kennedy and whatnot. But they really raised my brother and I to really be, think critically about how we can contribute to the struggle and whatever that struggle is. And, my parents' movement was the farm worker movement. But as I was going through the public school system, I really got interested in education, and specifically because Salinas is an amazing place to grow up, but not very many kids go on to, one, graduate from high school, two, definitely not to go and get a higher education. And so when I was, growing up, less than half of the students that I started with my freshman year graduated from high school. Of those who graduated from high school, less than 10% went on to a 4-year college. And so I got really interested when I did go off to school to thinking about how do I, why was that the case and why is there an educational inequality in various communities across the country? And so when I came to LA, I decided I wanted to be a teacher. And so I taught at LAUSD, and I started this nonprofit to work with students mainly in middle school, following them all the way through middle school and high school to get them to college. And it was probably the most powerful experience I had because I realized that outside of just providing educational opportunity, there's all of these other issues that affect whether or not a student can succeed, whether that's like housing or food scarcity,
right.
All those different issues. And so that really got me passionate about that type of work.
Yeah, and education scarcity and inequality it's still a problem today. We're in 2023, it still continues to be a problem like all over California. I would say around in the nation.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So currently, one of the issues that is prevalent with our students is housing insecurity. So one in 5 students are currently facing some form of housing scarcity. Have you or anybody close to you, or maybe even one of your students, has anybody close to you experienced homelessness? And how does that reflect your views on how you see the housing crisis?
Yeah, it absolutely does. So I mentioned I started this nonprofit, and so I've worked with tons of kids, some of my own students and others throughout LA for the past 10 years, and I've had various students experiencing homelessness, experiencing housing insecurity, whether it was because their family was undocumented and they were living in substandard housing, getting ripped off by slumlords, or it was not necessarily that they were unhoused, but they were living in incredibly overcrowded conditions. Just during the pandemic, I had a student from Boyle Heights amazing student who ended up at Yale University, really talented kid. And then the pandemic hit, and he had to come back to LA, to his one bedroom apartment in Wyvenwood that he shared with 8 other family members, and he almost dropped out because how do you do virtual classes in a setting where you don't even have Wi-Fi, you have none of the opportunities that probably your other peers at a school, at an Ivy like Yale have, and it was really demoralizing. And so that was something that really struck me. He ended up doing most of his classes over at my house. I live in Boyle Heights, but it really, to me, emphasized the fact that students are, the likelihood of them being successful, even if they are the most talented and they have the best educational opportunities, is very low unless you have some sort of housing and stability and you have some sort of a housing opportunity. Right. And so that's why it's one of my biggest issues on the board. And I'm excited about it because I'm a housing attorney as my day job, and so I'm really passionate about making sure that we provide those opportunities to LACCD students.
Yeah, and that's really wonderful because not everybody has an ally that is willing to help and be there for them. And unfortunately, that may not be the case for all of our students in LACCD. But I'm really happy that the student had a mentor in you.
The Los Angeles Community College District represents 9 community colleges, which serves about 200,000 to 230,000 students every year, making it the largest community college district in the country. The Los Angeles Community College District reported in 2016 that 55% of its student population are experiencing housing insecurity, and 19% of their student population are experiencing homelessness. A 2019 California Community College report that included all 57 California community colleges indicated that 60% of its student population faced housing insecurity in the previous year, and 19% of their student population are facing homelessness across the state, highlighting an increasing trend in housing insecurity and homelessness.
Last week, the Los Angeles Housing Authority released some data. And currently, the city of LA, Los Angeles, has a 10% increase in homelessness, and the county has a 9% increase in homelessness. How do you see the LACCD combating against the housing crisis here in Los Angeles? What can the district do to assist students?
Yeah, it's really demoralizing to me. I read about that. I think there's a couple of things that we can do. We can be increasingly aggressive and unapologetic about providing housing for our students, which I'm happy to say the board has that fire in their belly, and they're starting on that process. Passed a bond with $500 million set aside for student housing, and so the key is to be able to use those dollars wisely and start putting them towards student housing. It's increasing the programs that we already have. So we have a student housing pilot that we work with a lot of nonprofits to house students across the city. And then it's being really strategic about who we're focusing on, like the students that are absolutely the most vulnerable, students that have aged out of foster care, that literally have nowhere else to go, but have an opportunity to take advantage of education, making sure that we can provide housing opportunities for those students. I think 40%, and this is just the numbers, I think it's actually a lot more in reality, but 40% of foster care, former foster youth end up homeless. And so knowing that that is a direct pipeline to homelessness, an intervention at the community college level and making sure that foster students are able to get an education, but also that we can provide them housing is really, really critical. And then the second thing that I think is so important is that we have to get our students ready for the future of work so that they can get those jobs that will help them pay the rent, because we want to provide social housing and community land trusts and affordable housing, but the reality is, and I can tell you this as a housing attorney, the rent's not going to go down anytime soon. And so if we can make sure that our students are in the best position to be able to provide for their families and to continue to live in LA, that's the best thing that we can do. And the community colleges have a real opportunity to be able to do that right now, and we just have to be really focused.
Yeah, absolutely. And 40% of foster care students that have been in the system, like that's a pretty high alarming number. That's almost half.
Yes.
And then on top of that, at community college, you have a mixed bag of students. You have non-traditional students. Some of them have a family. So yeah, these issues are very real. Like if some students can't provide for themselves, some students have to also provide for their children and things like that. So with that initiative that you mentioned, done a little research on it, and I know that in April of 2022, the initiative was launched with $1.5 million allocated to housing, which is wonderful. And I know Senator Durazo was behind that as well. So it's always nice to have allies that care about the community.
Yeah.
Yes. So with this program, what were some of the successes and lessons learned that came about from this initiative?
Yeah, so that was launched in 2022. It's been roughly about a year. I think it's a real learning process for the district. I'm pretty new here too, but the district has never engaged, really fully in housing students, and so it's very, very new. And so I think it's a continuous learning process. One of my goals when I got elected was to build on that program and make sure that we're constantly improving that. The successes is that we have over 100 students housed across Los Angeles with our 5 nonprofit partners. We are constantly learning how to do that better. One of the things that, I think we've started, which is really important, is that we've started opening those lines of communication with our nonprofit partners that are experts in the field of housing, specifically student housing, and really trying to get a better understanding of what their needs are and how we can better serve students. One of the things I think we need to do a better job of is making sure that all students at LACCD are aware of those opportunities and making sure that we're really connecting with folks on the ground so that if they do have those housing needs, that they know where to go on their campuses.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the challenges as a community college where the resources or even a university available, sometimes you learn things through other students, word of mouth, and sometimes the resources are not always advertised. So I can attest to that. I actually, I transferred from Los Angeles Valley College to UCLA, so I went through the process. So I understand those challenges, and sometimes you just need a little bit of help, and and that can go a long way, especially with housing becoming exponentially expensive over the years here in Los Angeles.
LACCD estimates that 68% of students are part-time, which is unfortunately a barrier for many students because most support programs and resources require students to be full-time to be considered eligible.
And with this program, could you tell us what goes into the eligibility criteria? How are students chosen? Does it matter if they're full-time, if they're part-time, if they're undocumented, or if they're taking non-credit classes? Yeah,
that is a really, really good question, and it's something that we're trying to improve upon because all of those eligibility requirements are something that we've been discussing. And so, a lot of times with our nonprofit partners, the eligibility requirements are a part of their funding. They're getting funding from a certain organization that requires certain things. But other times it's like a decision of the district. So for example, most of those housing opportunities are for full-time students. And the district made a decision that they wanted, if they were going to pay for somebody's rent, they wanted to make sure that that student is a full-time student. Well, as you know, it's really hard to be a full-time student. And even if you have your housing paid for, if you have any sort of job and you're trying to juggle that job on top of being a full-time student, on top of other responsibilities you have, it might be really, really difficult. And so we've been actually looking at that and, where do we want to land? Do we want to continue that requirement of a full-time load? Or do we want to, really help students that for the most part, at times can be very, very vulnerable if they're housing insecure and, allowing some leeway for that. Another requirement with some of our housing providers is that you be single, right? It's a single housing unit.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is a vast majority, I think it's a majority at this point of our students have some sort of dependent that they're taking care of. Many of our students are parents. And so not being able to provide housing opportunities for students that are parents is really leaving a lot on the table. There's so many families that really, really need housing, and that's a whole population of people we're not hitting. We do have one housing provider, Optimus Family Youth Services, that does house a few students that have children and one that has a support animal. And so we're looking at how do we like expand our resources so that we can do that, because those are many students that have those needs. Whether or not you're documented is not an issue for housing, which is good.
Right.
But there are, a lot of our students come to us with a lot of trauma. And so making sure that we have trauma-informed care and support services is really, really important so that those students can be successful in those settings.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the issues I ran into, which prolonged my time for transfer, was like sometimes I needed to make income. So then I would go part-time, and then when I saved enough money, I would go full-time.
Right.
However, I think if the program had a loophole, not necessarily a loophole, but if you could say predicated upon acceptance, then you can go full-time, I think that would open up the doors for a lot of students who find themselves in my situation where, I don't have any other way to pay my bills other than working extra hours and going to school at the same time.
Yeah.
So I think that would be very beneficial in a program like this. And then earlier you mentioned that there was an expansion of funds. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, first off, that feedback is so great. And I think moving forward, we need to get more student sourced feedback so that we can improve the program like that, what you're saying, so that it really meets students' needs, because that's huge, and being able to kind of calibrate the program so based off of students' experiences is really, really important. So we're looking to do that in the future. But yeah, so I mentioned, I got elected in November of 2022. I took office in end of December, and one of my goals was to expand this program because it was passed in 2022 and it was set to expire to this month. There was no plans to expand the program, and so my goal was to get it expanded and to continuously improve on the program because I think it's really, really important. So I'm happy to say at our last board meeting last week, we approved a contract for another 2 years with our service providers to be able to expand this program, $3 million to go towards continuing the program and hopefully not just continuing it, but making it better. So what I'd like to do is, continuously improve on it and get feedback from students and the larger community so that we can make sure we're meeting people's needs.
Yeah, I often find that obtaining resources is very dependent on your income level, on how much income you earn.
Yeah.
What about students who fall in the gray area? They make slightly above that threshold, but they're not necessarily considered wealthy either. What can we do to better help students in these situations?
Yeah.
Can they reapply maybe?
Yeah, well, one of the things we were thinking about in order to serve more students is to also have a sliding scale. Some students need 100% rent paid for, right? They are coming out of a situation that leaves them highly vulnerable, but some students might have the ability to put in $100 a month or $200 a month or even $500, depending on their circumstances, but they still clearly can't afford a place in LA. The average rent for a one bedroom is $1,700 a month. So we've been thinking about that, maybe perhaps so that we can meet more students, have a sliding scale so that if you can contribute, it's more of a subsidization. The district right now with the $500 million is looking at building student housing, and with that student housing that we build, it'd probably be an average rent of about $500 a month, which is still a lot, but it's it's actually affordable compared to being able to rent out a place anywhere in LA.
Yeah, I think that would make a significant difference in people's lives because not everything's a one size fits all, and this kind of opens up the door for more opportunities. It makes it sounds like it would be more equitable.
Tacoma Community College in Tacoma, Washington has had a voucher program since 2014, which provides housing vouchers to unhoused and housing insecure students, which has helped 60% of program participants stay enrolled and graduate. Kansas City, Kansas Community College built a new residence hall for its students that housed 258 of its students at an affordable rate in 2022. Some of the existing housing initiatives fail to consider food insecurity among community college students. How would LACCD address these issues?
In our internship here, we've actually done some research on some national similar initiatives. So there's some success stories out there. So Kansas City, Kansas Community College, they actually launched a very similar initiative, but they actually built housing on campus. So with that housing also came jobs. So it eliminated students from going outside of their campus to look for work. It eliminated commutes, and the research has proven that when students are not worried about housing and they don't have these extensive commutes, their performance in the classroom, the GPA goes above 3.0. It hovers around there.
Yeah.
And then there's also a success story in Tacoma Community College. A very similar initiative, not necessarily on campus, but is there any plans for LACCD to implement some of these success stories into a formula that we can perhaps use here in Los Angeles?
Yeah, there absolutely is. And I'm glad we're having this podcast right now because it's right on the horizon. So, every campus in LACCD is different and there's different opportunities. So, for example, LA City College has a vacant lot across the street on Vermont that the district owns, right? And so there's a real opportunity to look at, okay, can we build, student housing right across the street from city? To go to your point, there's no commute, students can get there, it's easily accessible, there's a metro line right there. And then there's other campuses like Valley where there's not a ton of open space, but there's a lot of existing housing product. There's a lot of apartment buildings that are by campus that the district can consider perhaps acquiring, repurposing, turning into student housing to meet the needs of students. And then you've got places like Pierce that have a ton of open space, and there's different other considerations to take in. But the district is definitely considering all of those. We anticipate that we will have a request for an RFI or a request for qualifications come out around September or October of this year, and hopefully we'll be able to start tackling potential projects by January.
Issues I foresee or that I can anticipate, especially in Los Angeles. Los Angeles has zoning issues as far as is it residential, is it commercial, is it mixed zoning? So I can foresee some of those issues, problems somewhere down the road trying to get something like this implemented. So with these initiatives, how do you get the developers, the landlords, the unions, the students, the workers, the professors, how do you get everybody to the table to have a cohesive dialogue about these issues and to actually create changes and not kind of get into a pointing blame party, if you will? Yeah, how can we get everybody at the table to have this dialogue?
Very carefully.
Yeah.
But things like this podcast are actually part of that sort of strategy, right? So I'm a land use attorney, I do this for a living, trying to make sure that projects happen. I do a lot of affordable housing projects across Los Angeles, and you're right, it's getting everyone to the table and everyone kind of marching in the same direction. The good news is oftentimes what makes or breaks a project is the existence or lack of money, right? And the good news is that we passed a bond and we have some money. So we've got a lot of folks. I have gotten so many calls from developers and folks that are really interested in building student housing, but it's really making sure that the district, that our collective bargaining units, that our students, that our staff, that our faculty, the larger stakeholders, the city, the county are really, in support of what we're trying to do, and everyone's kind of moving forward in the same direction. The other good news is that housing's on everyone's mind right now. We have this homelessness crisis,
Absolutely.
we have a housing crisis. So I think in Mayor Bass and the County Board of Supervisors, we've got a lot of people that are super excited and big proponents of this work. So we just have to get organized. And the most important thing is we have to make sure that we use our dollars really wisely and we're actually helping students. And that's always the tough part.
Fiscal responsibility.
Exactly.
Trustee Hernandez campaigned on reevaluating the district and sheriff's relationship and combating LACCD enrollment decline. Student interns campaigned on her behalf for Trustee Seat 4. Enrollment rates are tied to funding.
So given the current trend, there's been an enrollment decline at our district, the Los Angeles Community College District. Given the tumultuous relationship between the community and the policing that goes around, part of your campaign as the Board of Trustee, part of that was to address some of these issues. Can you give us an update on how any of these changes, have any changes occurred between like the relationship between the campuses and the Sheriff's Department, or if there's been any improvement towards the enrollment decline?
The board approved the contract with LA County Sheriffs before I was on the board. I would have voted no for that. I just think that the sheriffs have proven to be distrustful in brown and black communities across Los Angeles, specifically in the East LA area. And so I would not have supported approving a contract with that division. Thank God there's a different sheriff in town, so he has an opportunity to prove himself. Obviously, so many issues with the sheriff, whether it's in the jails or in our communities. But we have looked at that contract, and we have really taken into account, a lot of the needs of students, faculty, staff. Students that don't feel comfortable with sheriff's presence on campus, but also, our SEIU janitorial staff that say, hey, I'm working the B shift in the middle of the night. Like, I need some sort of public safety, I need in the building. And so it's really balancing those needs and making sure that we can come up with a solution that works. I'm happy to say that in our last board meeting, we approved an amendment to the sheriff's contract that actually reduced the amount of money and funding that they are getting to take off some of the, in certain areas where it makes sense to reduce the amount of patrol and to improve and reduce the sort of kind of paramilitary police presence that you might feel on campus. So I'm happy about that. And, we'll see how that contract goes. It's something that I think everybody should be really vigilant about and making sure that, it works for us. We want all of our students to be safe on campus. You can't learn if you don't feel safe. I mean, as a teacher that has worked in a lot of, challenging environments, your students have to be safe to be able to learn. So that's the number one priority. And so making sure that we're doing that and people feel comfortable coming to campus is
right. Policing is sort of a double-edged sword, if you will. And I know that the community college district, the LACCD, a lot of the campuses are public, so anybody can walk on the campus.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would like to address that I didn't get a chance to ask?
Well, I forgot. You asked me about enrollment. So,
oh, yes.
So enrollment, which is probably the most important. Enrollment is so important, and I'm really excited. I've been very, very vigilant about that. I think it's so important. I'm excited that we have some campuses. Everyone is improving their enrollment numbers, but we have some campuses like Mission College, Harbor College, and Valley just recently, their enrollment numbers are up to their 2017 levels, which were the highest enrollment numbers that they've ever had for their summer session. And so that's great. We're getting back to where we used to be. It might not feel like that on the campuses because around 50% of that is still virtual learning, but that is so incredibly important. And I think for me as a teacher, we got to meet students where they are. And for a long time, especially in higher education, folks have said, we're going to open the doors and the students are going to come, and they're not coming. So we really got to meet them where we are. So the last meeting, we actually just approved a new site in Pacoima, in the middle of Pacoima, historic, Latino community in the East Valley, to make sure that we're meeting students where they are, to make sure we're providing educational opportunity in higher education to people that might not have ever thought about going to college before, senoras, women in their, middle age that, for the first time ever are going to take a class, and they're doing it because it's close to their community and they can walk and it's in the middle of, everything that their lives revolve around. So I'm excited about that, and hopefully that will increase, the enrollment that we see with Mission. And yeah, it's baby steps.
Right, so it'd be sort of a satellite campus.
For
Mission.
Not technically a satellite campus, but
more or less.
It's
the same concept.
Same concept.
And if you had a magic wand where you can make any changes in this district, something that would impact like the livelihood and make it better for students, what wish would you make?
Oh my goodness. There's so many students that have children And it is so hard. As someone who has a 3-year-old at home, I'm a working mom, I know it is so hard to balance life and work and raising your children. I mentioned if you're also trying to go to school on top of that. And every campus has beautiful child development centers that are, these amazing facilities with great faculty that are working them. But I don't think that we have done enough to make that accessible to students. There's definitely a lot of students that take advantage of that, but we should be doing more, and there should be more ability and access for students to take advantage of that resource. And the way we do that in the district is if we could expand capacity, and capacity means money. So if I could do anything, if I could wave a magic wand, I would try and make sure that our child development centers were really open to any student, and for that matter, faculty and staff that really needed those child care opportunities, because that is something in America that we just don't value, and it shows.
Right, and it can be very pricey. Right there with you, I have a 2-year-old.
Yeah. So. Oh yeah, so you know.
So yeah, it can be a struggle. So
Yeah.
I think that would really help a lot of students. It would open up a lot of doors, and people who had never thought about going to college, like you said earlier. If that need is met, then
Yes.
then why not? Why can't I go to college at that point? So I thank you so much for your time. Thank you for speaking with us today.
Yeah,
And
thank you for doing this. And then just the plug on housing, because it's coming down the road. As I mentioned, we are going to start, looking for folks who are interested in building student housing with the district around September. But more importantly, we are hoping to do a housing summit in October or November to bring in all the groups that we talked about to really talk about what is it that students need, and how do those needs inform the designs and the projects that we do engage in. So look out for that, and would love to make sure that we get that out there to the larger community.
Yeah, and that aligns with the values of the union here at AFT. Our goal really is to bring community back into community college, if you will.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And that concludes our insightful conversation with Trustee Hernandez, a true champion of community empowerment and social change. We are grateful for her time and the valuable perspectives she shared with us today. And remember, listeners, we have to be aggressive and unapologetic in providing housing solutions for students and ensure we are intentional in helping our vulnerable populations. LACCD has extended their student housing pilot program in partnership with 5 nonprofits across Los Angeles, which is currently housing 100 of its students. The Los Angeles Community College District has allocated $500 million to student housing from the LA bond measure that passed in the 2022 general election. Please keep an eye out for more information on the LACCD Housing Summit coming in October or November of 2020.